Hey everyone, welcome to recreating the climbing mechanic from Breath of the Wild in one episode. This mechanic took me a long time to make, so if you could hit that like button, it'd be greatly appreciated. And if you don't, my dad owns Nintendo, and I'll tell him to cancel Breath of the Wild too, so the option is yours. This will be the end result. You can climb on walls horizontally and vertically. You can climb around edges that are less sharp than a predetermined value. You can climb against angled walls. Once again, with a maximum and minimum angle clamp, climbing curved walls also works, as well as rough terrain. Once you reach the top of a climbable wall, you can vault up onto it if there's enough room for it. And lastly, you can jump up walls, which is compatible with angled walls as well. I created a new third person and adjusted the capsule to 92 by 32 so it fit our character's dimensions better, and moved the mesh to Z-91 to tighten things up. Next, let's go into the event graph and create a custom event called Attached to Wall and call a line trace off of it. For the start, we want our character's capsule location, and the end will be that value plus our actor's forward vector times our capsule radius times 3. You can extend this number if you want your wall detection to reach out further. We're going to collapse this to a macro since we'll be using it multiple times, so in the macro, create two outputs for the out hit and the hit bool. We also want a vector input called offset, since sometimes we're going to need an offset for this trace, and add that to the capsule location before plugging it into the start. If the hit is true, set our movement mode to flying and stop our movement immediately. This will get rid of any momentum when we attach to the wall. Next, we want to set orient rotation to movement to fall, since we don't want to be rotating around while climbing. Put a move component to node with a capsule as our component and a target location as the out hit location plus the normal times our capsule radius. This will put us against the wall instead of trying to put us inside of it. For the rotation, take the normal times -1 and make rot from X. Now we're going to use the E key to attempt to grab the wall. In our character movement tab, set our flying braking deceleration to 2048 so it's not like we're ice skating on our wall, and set our flying speed to 100 so we can climb at a realistic rate. Go ahead and test it and see if we attach to the wall. Voila, we do. Look at that. Amazing. So it's awesome that it works, but we can't move, and even if we did, it would look bad without animation, so I went to mixamo.com and downloaded these animations. Hanging idle, brace hang shimmy left, brace hang shimmy right, climbing up wall, and climbing down wall. For all of these, check in place if it has that option. Import these into Unreal Engine and retarget them to the UE4 mannequin. But wait, Cobb Dev, I don't know how to retarget animations. Well, you're in luck because I have a tutorial for that as well. You can click on the card in the upper right, or there's a link in description. After I got all the animations retargeted, I adjusted the position of them a bit so the transitions would be smoother. I won't be teaching how to do that part in this tutorial as it is optional, but let me know if you do want a tutorial for that. I ended up just using the right and up climbing animations and then reversed them for the left and down, since the original left and down didn't adjust super well. Create a new blend space called BS climbing and set the X and Y axis to -100 to 100 to match our speed, and the interp time to 1. We can decrease our grid divisions to 2 and add our animations. After some tinkering, I also set the right and left scale to 2. Open up our anim BP for the third person character and add a blend poses by movement mode between the default pose and the output. We want the default state machine to go into both default and walking, so create a cache pose for it and use that for both. Then off flying, add BS climbing. Create a variable for movement mode and also for speed X and speed Y for our blend space. In the event graph, set movement mode by casting to the third person character, converting it to a pure cast, getting the character movement, and then the movement mode. Set speed X to our character's velocity dot product with our actor's right vector so we can go left as well, and set our speed Y to the same but dot product with our up vector. Okay, now we have our animations and all, but we can't put them to use, so off of move forward and move right in our character's event graph, add a switch off movement mode with our character's movement mode as the input. Off walking and falling, add our regular movement input. For flying, we need a new function called wall climb movement with a float input for axis and a vector input for direction. When we added off flying, plug those in from our axis values and upright vectors. Back into the wall movement climb function, if axis does not equal 0, line trace by channel. The start will be our actor location plus our direction multiplied by our axis multiplied by our capsule radius times 2, or in math terms, our capsule diameter. For the end, take all of that and add it to our forward vector multiplied by our capsule diameter. If the trace hits something, set the hit location to a local variable called target. Next, we need to call in our wall trace macro again, so add that in, and we want the offset to be our target variable minus our actor location. If that hit is true, we need to move our character, so add an add movement input with the direction being our out hit location plus the normal times our capsule radius. So once again, it moves us against the wall, not into it. And get the unit direction from our actor location to this code we just made. If we plug this directly into our roll direction, then we'd be able to move right and up, but not left and down. So multiply it by a float, pull the select off that float, and see if we need to multiply it by 1 or -1. The index will be if the axis input is greater than 0. The scale value for movement input will be the axis directly. Lastly, we need to make sure our character is always updating his rotation when climbing, so set actor rotation as an R-interp 2. Plug get actor location into current, and target will be the wall traces normal times -1 rotation from X vector. Delta time is going to be the world delta seconds, and an interp speed of 5 worked well for me. If we test it now, we should be able to climb walls and have our animations match them. Unfortunately, once we get on a wall, we cannot get off, and that would be incredibly unfortunate in a fight against Ganon. So back in the event graph for our character, off press E, call a switch off movement mode. If we're walking or falling, call the attached to wall function. If we're flying, set your movement mode back to walking and turn orient rotation and movement back on. Collapse this into a function called detach from wall since we'll use that more than once. Now this will work for walls that go straight up, but if we climbed an angled wall, we would need to stand upright again. For that, we'll create a custom custom event called reset rotation. Create a timeline with a length of half a second, add a float track, and create a graph going from 0 to 1 and set it to auto interpolation. Outside it, set actor rotation with the actor rotation as the X and Z, but the Y value needs to be alert from our actor's Y to 0 with a timelines graph as our alpha. Add this custom event to the end of the detach from wall function. Now our rotation will always be corrected when we release from a wall, which we can test right now by pressing E again while we're attached. But we can't really test the rotation reset until we can climb angled walls, so create two float variables called max climb angle with a value of 45 and min climb angle with a value of -75, or with values of whatever you want. In wall climb movement, in between the trace for wall and add movement input, we need to check if it's a climbable angle, so add a branch. If the normal from the trace for walls times -1's rotation from x vector's y value is not greater than the max climb angle, continue on to another branch. This one will check if all that math is not less than the min climb angle. If that's true, continue on to the movement input. If the angle is less than the min climb angle, detach from wall. Since most of the times that will happen, we'll just be trying to get back down to the floor. Off the false for the max climb angle, we don't want to do anything, so just have our character stay still. We can now test to see if it works on these angled walls. So we can climb the low angle, the 90-degree angle, and the high angle, but it stomps us at one that's too slanted and puts us back into walking when going down to the floor. Alright, but Link can also leap up walls, so let's add that as well. We want to be able to jump up while we're climbing, and at the apex of that jump, grab onto the wall again. Off input jump from the character's movement, set notify apex to be true. Then before jump, create a switch on movement mode and add jump to walking. Create the begin play node and assign the event on breach jump apex. Speaking of apex, I love Apex, the game Apex Legends. I main Watson. Who do you main? Okay, I'm getting off topic. The custom event will fire off whenever we reach the tallest point in our jump. Create a boolean called check for apex and ask if it's true off the custom event. If it is, attach to the wall, but we don't want to check this every single time we jump, just when we jump up a wall, hence the boolean. Create a custom event called jump up wall. In it, set movement mode to walking, then launch the characters by the actor's up vector multiplied by whatever jump force you want. I set mine to 600. After that, set check for apex to be true. Once we land, we want to set the check for apex back to false, so after event on landed, set it to false. If we jump and we don't detect a wall at the apex, we want to go back down to our regular walking. So in our attached to wall event, if hit from trace for wall is false, detach from wall. Before we test it, we need to call jump up wall off the jump switch off flying. Now we should be able to jump up walls, including angled walls, and he'll attach back down to the wall unless there's no wall to attach to. Next, let's clean up the ability to move around corners. We want to add another line trace for checking corners, so next go to the wall climb movement function and add another line trace if the first one didn't hit. The start will come from the trace end of the original line trace, and the end will be that trace plus the direction multiplied by the axis times -1 multiplied by the capsule diameter. If that trace hits to be true, call the wall trace macro again. We want to make sure this corner isn't too sharp to turn onto, so take the hit normal and normalize it dot product with the normalized normal of the previous line trace. I hope that's a pretty normal instruction that you get in game dev. Okay, I'm sorry. If we take the ACOS in degrees, absolute that to a float, and check if it's less than our max turn angle, which I set to 65, set the local variable target to the line trace's location, then continue on to the rest of the original code starting from the trace for wall. Okay, so now that we have two angles, one at 90 degrees and one at less than 65 degrees, we can't pass the first, but we can pass the second. Woo, we did it, hooray! Okay, whew, my voice is getting pretty tired. All right, home stretch. Let's be able to vault up surfaces when we reach the top. So back in that wall climb code we just added, if all of that max turn angle code is false, we want to check to another condition that the direction equals the actor up vector and our axis is greater than 0, which means only if we're moving up. If this is true, we want to check if we have enough room to vault up, so create a capsule trace by channel. The start and the end will be the wall angle line trace's hit location plus the up vector multiplied by our half height plus 10. This puts it at the top of the structure we're climbing, not inside of it. We add the plus 10 for a little extra leeway. The radius and half height of the trace is the radius and half height of our character capsule. If we didn't hit anything, we do want to vault up. Create a custom event called vault up and give it two vector inputs, first location and second location. Add it to the end of the wall climb movement, and for second location, we just want the capsule start end code, but for the first, we want that code plus our actor forward vector times our capsule diameter times -1. This will make us move up and forward instead of trying to go diagonally through a climbable structure. Back in the event, first call detach off wall, then call two move component 2s with the capsule as the component. First location will go into the first, second will go into the second, and our actor rotation will be rotation. I decreased both times of it to 0.15, so it went up a little faster, and for a little extra pizzazz, I checked ease in on the first one. Now if we test it, we can vault up any surface that has enough space, but not one that's blocked. And there you have it, the entire Breath of the Wild climbing mechanic in one video. If you're unaware, I do an entire series on Breath of the Wild in UE4, so make sure to subscribe and check those out. I'm also making a game of my own, and I have some pretty funny videos about it on my channel, so, subscribing is, the whole package. Anyway, thanks for watching, like, and comment. I never want to touch this project again, and I'll see you next time. Just kidding, it was a ton of fun to make. Bye. Darling,